beautiful noise, the music of John Cage. This book, I feel, is so special. And even though, of course, every author says their last book is their favorite book, right? I just feel that I just had the feeling that this one was special from the beginning. But first, I want to thank my friends from childhood, Patty, my dearest friend, and from the library. I have so many friends from the library here. I even have my former bureau chief from the Middlesex News, who was fantastic. Thank you, Rick, for coming. I have my school principal here. I have author colleagues. I have neighbors, teacher colleagues, and writer friends. So it's just wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. So John Cage believed that all sounds were music. So if we think about it for a minute, that would mean that we're all musicians, right? Do you think of yourself as a musician? Are there any musicians here? Are there any, who plays an instrument? Becky, you do?
Piano.
Okay, I quit piano. My piano teacher was Jack Nicholson's real dad, just so you know, a little tidbit. And he encouraged me, he said I had a good ear. Well, I did have a good ear and I listened. I did a lot of listening in my busy family. And so I feel like I have something in common with John Cage. He was an only child. He grew up in California. His father was an inventor. And he had a difficult childhood in that he was bullied in school because he thought different. He was gay, and I'm sure people sense that about him. And I always wondered, how does someone come to invent things, right? How did these things happen? How do you think of something creative? How do you do something different? So he just dedicated his life to, leaning in to being different and to using his creativity in a unique way. And he just strove to do that over and over again. When he was a kid, he grew up on the beach and he listened for the waves to be quiet. He listened for silence. And he realized there was no such thing as silence. And I did the very same thing as I was growing up, because I grew up on the beach. And I remember, there are those seagulls squawking and the waves are crashing. And, there's that moment when the wave slides back down the beach and it's almost quiet, but it's really never quiet. And I remember wishing that there could be a moment when it was really silent, but there never was. So, that's kind of how I came to this subject. I think that's what drew me to the subject. I saw a photo in the New York Times of John Cage listening to the sound of him stroking a cactus spine with a feather. It was mic'd, and who would even think to do that? But he did. He looked for sounds where no one ever thought to look. And when you think of it, right, we make sounds all the time, right? We tap, we talk, right? We sneeze, we laugh. That's all music. It was all music to his ears. So he was born in 1912 and he died in 1992, and he was always looking for new things. He was always on the cutting edge. And there was even something in the newspaper today, in the New York Times magazine, which I have somewhere, but a wonderful quote about listening to the sounds around you and learning from that, and how you can learn from that, and how you can change you, and you can change the world even by doing that, which is a kind of amazing thing when you think about it. So he believed, first of all, that every day was a beautiful day. Day, beautiful day. Every day is a beautiful day, he would say. And that's sort of like Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, write it on your heart that every day is the best day of the year. So being present, really being aware of your surroundings, taking it in, and paying attention, which is kind of a link to 16 Words too, because William Carlos Williams paid attention to the world around him. And I think that's key to creativity, I really do. So I guess that's how I came to this book. I wrote it many different ways, many times. I began in, I think it was 2015 or definitely 2016. I wrote a draft. It was pretty much a straight biography. I thought it was lyrical and beautiful, and it didn't go anywhere. And I wrote it again. I tweaked, revision is totally different than tweaking. As writers know, you have to kind of pull the whole thing apart and start all over. So I tried to write just about John Cage's silent piece, which is something that I knew about when I saw that photo of him in the New York Times. I knew that he had this piece where people sat in a barn in upstate New York and watched a pianist sit at the piano, but the pianist never struck a note. He did open and close the lid. Well, he began by closing the lid of the piano. That's how he began his performance. And there were no sounds except ambient sounds. So come on in. And make some noise coming down the stairs, please. We need to make some noise. Thank you. So Claudia has a hound, so she knows, and I know that our favorite sounds are hounds howling, and they love to play together, so it's sort of fun to have you here. Thank you. So where was I?
The barn.
Oh, revision. Thank you. Okay, yeah. So I knew of that piece where, there were no sounds, but Cage insisted he composed that piece. He used the same rigorous, incredibly taxing method, to come up with his plan for the piece, how long the piece would be, and the instrument, the loudness of the piece. In this case, he just made it he assigned no notes to his composition. So that's how he created a silent piece, of course. And it was his favorite. It was his favorite piece because his favorite sounds were the sounds around him, the ones he hadn't composed. He wanted to be surprised by sound. So I hope you would like to be surprised by this book, because I was surprised when I saw the illustrations for the book. I only saw, I don't know if I saw any illustrations. The illustrator Il Sung Na asked me for some information. For example, was Cage right-handed or left-handed? Well, I knew I had a picture that showed him that he was writing with his right hand, but lots of people are ambidextrous. I didn't know. So I had to get in touch with the John Cage Trust, and they really helped me with this book. Laura Kuhn is the director, and she was so supportive, and she helped me a lot with the facts in this book, and she even read it before I finalized my text, because I wanted it to really be true to Cage, and so she really helped with that. Hey, there are little cushions in the front. People wanna? Oh, okay. Come on, Mason. So we were asking if there are any musicians in the audience. Okay, but everybody should now raise their hand, right? Because you're all creating music. Take a cushion.
This is for you. Here, just take it.
How Van Gogh. So you came in at the perfect time. This is my former colleague, Nina Schwartz, literacy specialist at Hardy, and her son, Mason, who Nora used to babysit, who is an incredible musician. I've had the honor of hearing him. And I'm glad you came right now because I'm about to open the book. So until I got the PDF, and when I saw the PDF, I was just amazed at what Il Sung Na did. So he created images for all the sounds in this book. He created 60 pictures of sounds, and they're all on the end papers. And if you look in your book, I think you'll be amazed. And they make so much sense when you look at them, but whoever thought, Carrie, of making pictures of sounds? But it's so brilliant, right? And so then he uses these images throughout the book. And there's so much here. You could look at this every day and still see something new every time you do. So I dedicated this book to Nina because she always listens. She's a good listener. And her dad, who is also an experimental composer at Bowdoin College, an author, helped me with this book because he encouraged me. And he told me that he thought cage would be a good subject. And we had some back and forth emailing, which was really, really lovely. And then I got to participate in a piece that he wrote. Was it called Elevator Music?
I think that's what it's called.
I think so. So I went up to Bowdoin, and Mason was my conductor on the elevator, which was really fun. So how tall is that? How many stories is that?
10 floors.
Okay, 10 floors. So you get in the elevator with the conductor, and the conductor decides which floor you're going to stop at. The doors open, and there are people playing music. And then the doors close, and I guess the conductor decides how long, too, right? How long you're going to listen. And you go to another floor, and music again. And were there any floors where there were no musicians?
No, but there should have been. John Cage should have said yeah.
So that was really fun, and that's, I wanted to dedicate to Nina and to Elliot Schwartz. And Ilsung Na dedicated it to the ones who have curious ears. Which is beautiful. Okay, beautiful noise. More musicians. There's a seat here. There are cushions. Cynthia. My nephew Christopher. And his opera singer girlfriend. So we were talking about how everyone actually is a musician, right, Christopher?
Yes.
Okay. Christopher's a saxophonist and a music educator. So perfect timing. Okay, by me. And Ilsung Na. Okay, this begins with an epigraph from John Cage. I can't understand why people are frightened of new ideas. I'm frightened of the old ones. So can we just turn and talk to a neighbor about what that might mean? Come on, turn and talk, you all know. Ball sounds. I heard one very screechy, I saw one screechy video where he's kind of doing this odd kind of singing, but just thought was that it? Dan, was that it? Or was it
That was
John?
Yoko.
Yoko Ono was doing this like kind of wild singing, and he's like, that's beautiful. But there was one sound he didn't like, and you'll find out. Okay, what if all the sounds you heard, a garbage truck screeching, feet skipping, pigeons scattering, tires whispering, cats hissing. Can we hiss? Very good. Children giggling. Giggles, anyone? Balls bouncing, dog tags clinking. Had to get a dog in there. Taxis vrooming. Sounded to you like music. What if you wished a piano could sound like a whole orchestra? So you stuck erasers and bolts and screws between and under its strings and made music no one had ever heard before. Then you'd be like
John Cage.
What if people stormed out of those concerts and said your music wasn't music, but you still believed it was? What if you knew that this music was unique, that this music was important, and that any noise could be beautiful? And you knew that loving all sounds, except the refrigerator's but you were trying to love that too, made the world more joyful, then you'd be like
John Cage.
Yet you don't have to bang on a bathtub or brush cactus spines with a feather or blow a seashell like a trumpet or do any of the things he did. except for one. To be like
John
John
Cage.
Cage, the only thing you have to do is listen. He had a very exacting way of preparing his piano. It was not slapdash in any way. He figured out exactly the positions he wanted to use, the kinds of screws he wanted to use. Hello, thanks for coming. And he spent hours doing this, absolutely hours. You ever try this one, Christopher? Have your students try it? Yeah. Any questions about the story? I struggled with this manuscript. I thought about it for years. My critique group members read it over and over. My agent read it over and over. And it was, traditional third-person narration. I focused straight bio. First I wrote kind of straight bio. Then I focused only on that silent piece, the silent piece. And then I put it aside for a while because I had a lot of other things going on. And I wasn't successful with it, right? I put it away. And then, I don't know what happened because last year was so horrible. It was Christmas, my husband had COVID, my dog was in the hospital with kidney disease. I was exhausted. Maybe that was it. I couldn't really think of it. Like, I had no creativity, I thought, but then I woke up one morning and I just scribbled down what became the story, and it came out in second person. And because of course it was about listening. Why didn't I know that, right? I knew it, but I didn't know it. And so it just had to happen. Sometimes these things happen when you're ready. So, 6 years later, here it is. But I think this is the form that it needed to be in. It was, tinkering with the lights and everything and the machines, and it was in the Armory in New York City, so it was like this huge space. There was so much noise. It was wild. There's actually video of it. And so one of his assistants said to him, "John, your pants are catching on fire." They were smoking, and he says, "Isn't it marvelous?" Which I just love. It was so much fun. That was the other thing that it took me so long because there was so much to learn and love about John Cage. I wanted to tell everything about him, right? Because you just want to share all these wonderful things about your subject, but that really wasn't the point, right? Because you can all read, everyone says it's not an article, but sometimes you can't help, and I was a journalist, right? So, you want to tell all the facts, but they're in here. The facts are in here. It just took a while to happen, and I'm just happy it happened this way. I saw Dan.
Was he a proficient pianist? I mean, what was his instrument originally?
Piano, yeah.
It was piano.
Yeah,
Was he
and
good?
he had a teacher who used bird songs in her own compositions, and he tried to compose traditionally, and he just gave up. He studied under Schoenberg, and he invited Schoenberg to his concerts, and he could never come. And so finally, John said, "Please, can you come to my concert?" And he said, "I'm not available at any time." So he said, everything I've tried has fallen through. He tried to form a center for experimental music. He, typed out letters to universities asking for funding. And he, lived a pretty bare bones existence. Peggy Guggenheim helped him when he first came to New York. But then they had a falling out, and so he was destitute. He had no money. He drove around in a ratty van. He was fortunate enough to meet Merce Cunningham when he was in the state of Washington, and they became lifelong partners in dance and art. And I love that, Merce didn't dance to music, right? And John Cage didn't compose the way a traditional composer would. So they were perfect partners that way. Question? Yes, Will.
Does that mean, because there's the song that's just 4.5 minutes of silence, does that mean that technically anybody could play any instrument?
Sure. And so, you know what, so he also said, I mean, one of his compositions was, so you could either do 4 minutes, 33 seconds, the way it's written, or you could just play any instrument you wanted for as long as you wanted, as loud as you wanted. So that was another composition. So we're going to do something like that now, but I'd like more, if anyone has more questions. Yes,
As a teacher,
yes.
I'm wondering if I were going to incorporate this into a lesson. How would you, as a teacher yourself, present this? Would you present it with the music first, with the book first?
I would present it by starting with listening first. In fact, I did at Hardy. So we would listen to the sounds around us, and there was always something, right? Sometimes we went outside, and we would write down what we heard, and we would write poems from that. That was one thing that I did at Hardy. And Christopher, how would you use this? Christopher is a music educator.
Yeah, I think I would start with listening as well, and then also have some sort of composition component as well, maybe after the reading through and interacting with the book, and then have some sort of creation component.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. And would you have them hear Cage's music first before they did their own compositions?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think so. Yeah, I think I would have maybe a variety of different pieces to like listen in an environment, and then have, you know, like early late romantic type piece, and then, you know, early Schoenberg, and then also Cage, and do that as well. Kind of have different options as well, and then see what creation and compositions come out of that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was interviewed by a music educator in, I think, North Carolina. She has a blog called PB Jams, and she interviews people who have music-related books. And she created all sorts of teaching tips to go with this book. And she even made a playlist of John Cage. So I'll pop that onto my website. But in the meantime, if you just look for PB Jams, Jamz, you would find the Cage playlist.
Can I ask one follow-up question?
Yeah,
I'm the
please.
educator. I'm sure there are some kids out there and some grown-ups out there who will say, but this isn't really music. Do you think the book is what you would answer with?
Sure. I think that would really help. Because I think, but I think what if they started experimenting with recording sounds and putting them together? So there's a free John Cage app, and it has all the tools, the bolts and the screws, all of the tools that he used, and you can just, you know, make your own recordings, and you can save them and, you know, try things all different ways. It's really easy for elementary kids to use, so that's a fun tape, right? By hand. And I think he and one of his friends, composer friend, worked together, and they had a little contest. And for a 1-inch piece of tape, the contest was whether they could split it into 1,000 segments, and they did. Okay, I don't know, but yeah. So we're going to do a little experiment right now with sound. So Dexter and Mona, would you mind handing out some of these? This is how we're going to do it. I have no idea what's going to happen, and that's the whole point, right? So the first, say 3 rows. When I say go, you're going to play your instrument, whatever way you like. 4 seconds on, and then 4 seconds off, and 4 seconds on until I tell you to stop. And then after the first 3 rows, you all can play your instruments for 5 seconds on and 5 seconds off. This was my daughter, Nora. Yes, thank you, Nora. She's also music. Okay, so, okay, so we all start at the same time, but you have to do your own count. Okay. Okay, go. What did you think? That was great! Clap it! Woo! had fun with this. Did everyone get that I made with a bunch of activities? Yes, I thought you might like this. I have stickers, I have business cards, bookmarks, and yeah. So where are we going to?
So, books are available upstairs if you have